horse and barbed wire. I don't like this place. Like, oh, that's what you don't like about it.
Yeah, that girl was worthless.
Yeah,
She was worthless in this movie.
well, and I also love just pure.
Oh,
What?
we're live. I think we're live on YouTube.
Oh, hey, so
Yeah,
we're
I'm
continuing to talk about the Bloody New Year for a bit, and then we'll switch over to some other stuff. We were talking about how much I loved the music, and we're talking about some really bad acting, and oh man,
with some really great moments. Yeah, wow, we're live. We're on YouTube. We have figured out how to break the system. I think you're supposed to have 1,000 subscribers and like 4,000 watch hours or something like that in order to go live on YouTube. But it turns out if you use a third-party platform, screw the system. You can just go right to it.
Maybe this episode that just aired was so amazing that we have 4,000,
just 1,000 right now.
1,000 followers right now.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Yeah.
So yeah, if
we're
you're
just testing to see if we could do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, done. See ya. Bye, everybody.
Peace out.
Yeah. No. So if you're just tuning in, or you're watching this down the road, I don't think anybody's watching right now. But I'm Darby Ellis Lewis Wilson. This is Chris Anonymous. We talk about schlocky movies, but since we're doing kind of this live test run thing, this
the
weird thing we've never done before.
You missed the episode.
Yeah. Go home.
Yeah. What are you doing here? Go home.
We're going. I just saw 2 nights ago Ghostbusters Afterlife, and a few weeks before that, or a week before that, I saw Spiderman No Way Home. I'm a little behind on the popular movies, but I'm excited about them since I've seen them, and I want to talk about them. And this is just what Chris and I do normally. We watch movies and we talk about them, what we liked, what we didn't like, things
so
like
we
that.
Thought
so
we'd make a podcast, record us talking about them, and if you like it, awesome. Yeah. We hope you do, and if not,
surely everyone wants to listen to that,
right?
So anyway, we've talked about Spider-Man No Way Home a little bit already, I think. Maybe we'll save that toward the end. I don't know how long we're going to be on here.
Yeah, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever. Yeah, we can talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. So normally we talk about old kind of horror movies and bad comedies and just schlocky movies in general. But since this is not canon, it's not one of our official episodes. Yeah, we're going to talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yeah. So what did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you hate it?
I liked it. Yeah. I didn't love it. I liked it a lot. It was like a B plus.
Yeah.
Maybe an A-. It probably rode the wave of A+, B-.
Well, through the whole thing. So
B+, A-.
First of all, I should say that I liked the movie a lot more than my experience of watching the movie. Because
do tell.
So I've always been kind of against the comfy theater chairs recline and whatnot and are heated, just because it seems weird to me to sit in, I don't know, it just feels like sitting in someone else's
the chairs that were in the theater that we went to see Parasite in.
No, those I like those seats, but theaters are refitting their movie theaters are refitting their theaters with these reclining chairs.
Oh, weird.
And they go back and they're fake leather and they're heated, and it just feels like I'm sitting in someone else's furniture, someone else's living room, and someone else's farts, and
on one of those gross toilet seats.
I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. And so when we got into the theater, Megan, my girlfriend, pointed out to me that oh, this sucks, these aren't the nice reclining chairs, and I was like, nah, that's okay, I don't like those seats anyway. Turns out I've been babied for a long time, because I sat in those chairs and I was just like, ugh, like just so uncomfortable the entire time. And then like with the big chairs, you get a lot of space to yourself. Like when I went and watched Spider-Man No Way Home, there was a person sitting right next to me, but I didn't feel cramped at all. I felt, I could stretch out. And then watching Afterlife, there was no one beside me except Megan, but there were people in front of me and behind me, and I felt like just so claustrophobic and cramped, and there were like kids crying and people eating popcorn. I was like, oh man, this sucks. I hate this.
Yeah, I'm still small town theater, so we still got the old school seating.
Yeah, you haven't upgraded to the big city yet.
No, but there's talking about claustrophobic. There's one. They added like extra theaters in there so they could show more movies, since so many movies were getting released at the same time, several years ago. And there's one that's basically like you're in an airplane. There's one aisle and there's like 4 seats on each side, and it's just super narrow. And like usually they'll do more of like the dramas and the art house films and that, where like there's not as many people. But every once in a while, if a lot of blockbuster movies were all released at the same time, they'd have to throw one in there. And then it was just like this cramped, narrow, like the seats are super tight and narrow, and it's like a bad scene from like a 80s comedy where there's like, just the airplane is just over full of kids like falling out into the aisle, and so I know
when I lived in Colorado Springs, they had the cheap seats, the dollar theater, and they had theaters like that were really narrow. There was one that had like a huge crack like going down the center of the screen, but to me it was all okay because it cost me $1 to go in there, and I'd usually go when like no one else was there, so I mean it didn't really bug me at all. A crappy thing about this movie going experience is that like they had the surround sound on, but it was very, very low. And so all of the audio was just very mono and coming straight from the screen. And so it just didn't seem like even very loud.
Weird.
So anyway, that's the Metro Lux Theater in Loveland, Colorado. So boo on you if you're watching. Together. Yeah, get it together. And I wanted to go there because I don't know if they do this in small towns, but they serve alcohol there. They serve beer.
Nice.
And I now when I go to theaters, I just expect having a beer with me. And I ordered a 90 shilling, and they gave me like a thimble to sip on. And yeah. So anyway, the experience wasn't that great, but the movie Ghostbusters Afterlife was pretty okay. I wish it was maybe about like 5% better than it was. If it was 5% better, it would have been like an A+ movie. I just didn't think it was a very tight movie.
I thought it was a great legacy sequel, but the mere fact that I have to say legacy sequel is inherently problematic. Like there's something off about legacy sequels in general. Even the best of them, there's something. Dirty is not the right word, because I love that they're making them. I'd rather be in a world that does legacy sequels and you get that nostalgia factor than not. But it's just something off.
Yeah.
And it was also really strange having Harold Ramis as a ghost in it, because he's dead. Right. Spoilers if you haven't seen it. So sorry.
Yeah. Urch breaks. We do a ton of spoilers. We are like not a spoiler-free podcast at all. I've been meaning to say that. No one's complained so far because no one really watches so far, but it's all spoilers. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting, the Harold Ramis thing. And
I thought it was interesting too, but go ahead.
Well, so there's like a real like moral conundrum, right, about using actors that have passed, using their likeness to be in a movie. And it really kind of came about with the Star Wars movies with Peter Cushing playing Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, and Carrie Fisher in not The Last Jedi, but I think the Rise of Skywalker, because they use her daughter to stand in for her, and then they like digitally added her face. And so there's like this real question of is it morally right to use the likeness of these actors once they've passed? And it always makes me think of The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger, when they make that fake fight between him and Jesse Ventura to make it look like Jesse Ventura's character killed Arnold's character, and they just like digitally added the faces on and stuff. And right, that was like crazy technology back then,
right?
And now it's like absolutely real. But yeah, is it right to do that? And I think that is a interesting question, because I don't think that I'd want someone to like steal my if I were an actor, I wouldn't want someone to steal my likeness after I'm passed. But in this case, I think that I would be totally okay with it, because one, right, there's no lines, and I think that's a big part. Two, it's a movie about ghosts, so it's kind of this like weird meta thing, and it's like it's a nice send off. Like,
yeah,
it's essentially, what's the difference between doing that and putting up just a picture of him? And like, if they were to use digital effects to take a picture frame of him and like wave it around,
right. Yeah, and that's why I'm okay with it. This is like one of the few instances where I am okay with it, but just because I'm okay with it doesn't mean that it still didn't feel slightly strange to me.
Well, and I think they like made toys of it too, so it is a bit of a cash grab.
And, I mean, the whole third act is basically not the whole third act, but just that whole end point. Once the Ghostbusters show up, it's just a send off. It's just a goodbye. It's like this really beautiful, sweet goodbye to this great person.
Right, and it was really nice, and I loved that it said for Harold, and it wasn't like the complete end of the movie. Like I like that it just really stopped and took the time to dedicate that to him. I thought that was cool, and I thought it was sweet.
Jason Reitman, who directed it, whose father, Ivan Reitman, did the original Ghostbusters, right? So they kept it in family too, right? So that also makes it seem more okay. Like there's, this was a group of people sending off one of their own, not a cash grab per se.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly it took quite a while to get this made, But the Ghostbusters at the end, even though it wasn't, it seemed very Deus Ex Machina to me. Like, I mean, one, it's not, because one, they're using the Ghostbusters stuff the entire time, and two, they call up Ray, and so we know that he's going to show up. But just the fact that like they show up and just essentially save the day, and then the movie kind of switches to them in New York, right? It ends with with
like
Ecto 1 in New York, and then it goes to Winston. Like it doesn't give us any aftermath of the family's life.
And again, that Deus Ex Machina only works in that legacy sequel, because you expect them to show up. Like if you were to do that in a regular movie, you'd be like, oh, come on, really? Of course Calvary came in. But here it's a legacy sequel, so you're like, yeah, they showed up. This is a lot of people. That's why they went. That's why they paid their money. Like, when's the cameo? When are they coming? So
well, and I haven't seen it, but the girl Ghostbusters, that's one of the reasons why people don't like it, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't seen it, is because they didn't do the cameos correctly.
They were playing different characters in that world.
Right.
Yeah. That we'll just save the all-female Ghostbusters for another time. I didn't love it.
Maybe for the main show.
Right. I didn't love it, but I don't hate on it like everyone else does. Like there was an just unprecedented amount of hate for really silly reasons. So I'm not part of that at all, but that doesn't mean that I think it's a brilliant movie either.
Right.
Yeah. But back to this one. So I was talking to one of my other friends, who I talk movies with. It's pretty much you and him.
Oh, okay. Cheater, pumpkin eater,
pumpkin head watcher eater. He pointed out something, and I noticed it right away too, and I really agree with it. And again, I think this is an inherent problem with legacy sequels is you call back so much that your plot starts to just mirror the plot of the first movie instead of being its own thing. Like, you take homage and callbacks to such an extreme that, I mean, it's the same plot. It takes a different setup, but in the end, it's the gatekeeper and the keymaster, and it's the same bad guy from the original. And there's nothing wrong with having that villain come back, but it's the exact same story beats.
Right. I mean, something that sort of bugs me about it, well, no, it not sort of really bugs me about it, is that I love the real Ghostbusters, the cartoon.
Oh, I love the real Ghostbusters.
In fact, it was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but I mean, I sat down and rewatched all of them, and I still love them. Like, I love the Ghostbusters cartoon, and it's funny because in their world, the movies are like movies made about them, and so like, yeah, it's just crazy. But anyway, I really wish that they would have dug into that well of content. So a character in the cartoon that's kind of a big baddie, like they don't have like a really big overarching villain, because of the episodic enough. Yeah, and it's because of the episodic nature of it, and just like the way they did stories back then. But Sam Hain, the evil spirit of Halloween, shows up a few times, and he's also always kind of lingering. Like if they show like there's a threat of all the ghosts getting out, they make sure to show that Sam Hain could possibly get out, and that like ups the stakes of it a little bit. And so it would have been great if maybe he was the bad guy for this, just to dig into their back catalog of stuff. They didn't have to do Gozer.
Yeah, they didn't have to do Gozer. That being said, I love the chase scene in the Walmart with the
yeah, that was pretty good.
And then the little miniature Stay Puft Marshmallow Mans. That was fun. That was fun.
I never thought like committing suicide would be so funny.
Yeah. It was this fun little set piece, just this little thing, and I loved that.
Yeah, that was a great pause, and I wish that there was more in it. Like, so my biggest immediate problem with the movie was that for the amount of time that the movie is supposed to take place in, like it takes place in basically like a week and then a day and a night. To me, it felt like that time took too much of the movie. Like the movie moved too slow for it to take place in such a short amount of time, where like original Ghostbusters, right, it takes place over, I don't know, a year, a few months, right? They do a lot of montage sequences to show that the Ghostbusters, right, they're busting ghosts, they're doing things, they're making a business. And this whole thing takes place in 1 week essentially. And there's just like a lot of dead time and a lot of things that don't really affect the story much, like the love interest. I thought that was kind of a bit of a worthless story, like going to the sheriff's office. It didn't really affect much. There were just a lot of things that didn't affect the story very much. And they could have snapped along. Yeah. Or they could have replaced that with better things like the Walmart Marshmallow Men scene.
Right. Well, and I mean, this is a minor gripe, but I thought that the metal eating guy, from the trailer, I thought that was Slimer.
Yeah, same.
And it's not Slimer. And that's cool because I liked a metal munching ghost. I thought that was really cute. Like I love a cute monster.
Right.
Yeah, everyone does from Gremlins on.
Yeah.
But you could have had a Slimer in there somewhere.
Yeah, and
why couldn't Slimer work in his shop?
Right. If Ray hangs up the phone and he looks to Slimer and says, "Here we go again."
Well, are like I'm not gonna help him, and then Slimer does like some kind of like yeah, and they're like,
oh, come on, Spud.
Yeah.
I mean that would have been a great cameo. And the thing with Muncher, I think his name is.
Yeah.
So while I enjoyed all of that stuff, I just wish there would have been more ghost busting in this Ghostbusters movie, because essentially he's the only ghost they bust, and then like bust Gozer and the Terror Dogs at the end. And I realize that, and this is something that I did like, that I will give them credit for, that Phoebe, is that her name? The little girl?
I think so.
that she didn't like immediately they didn't just immediately like catch the ghost, right? They weren't just automatically good at busting ghosts. They had to like go through this chase sequence to sort of get the skills that they need to do it. Like I am glad that they had her fail and right. have to work up to it. But I would have liked to have seen something more along the lines of, okay, if they're going to do the Gozer story, then that means like every time there's an explosion or whatever in that temple, maybe one ghost gets out. So like ghosts are showing up more and more, so we get to see them more and more until the final explosion.
You know, it would have been a great scene with something like that to get more Ghostbustery moments in it.
Mm-hmm.
Is like the teenage boy, whatever his name is from Stranger Things.
Yeah. The 80s kid.
Yeah. Nerdy 80s kid who I really enjoy. I think he's a fun actor.
Yeah, I love him and everything he's in.
And like I love him. I love the whole cast. The casting I thought was really good. Overall, I loved this movie. We're nitpicking it, but that's what we do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like I got love for this movie. I'm just armchair editing.
Yeah.
So his love interest. What if she is haunted by some teenage jock ghost, like maybe an ex or maybe someone who always tried to get her to go out with her but couldn't, right?
Yeah.
And so our 80s teen has to take his little sister with the ghost busting equipment and try and impress her by capturing that ghost. And you could have this, he could fail miserably and she could laugh, but then he could succeed. And then, there's just moments like that where like you could get to know and have better connection with all the characters in the town and strengthen their connections through the act of ghost busting.
Well, and like Lucky, I think is her name, the love interest character. I don't think that was. I don't think that character shouldn't have been there. I think it was a waste of a character because, like, at the end, she's like a Ghostbuster, right? But she gets into it, and I just don't feel like it was earned, right? Like, why is she a part of the team? She's like been giving him crap.
I think they did a much better job with Podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I love Podcasts. He was really funny. Megan was laughing the entire time because I have a podcast.
Yeah. It's just
she was like laughing at all the similarities.
An adorable kid and a good actor. He did a really great performance. It's a fun character, and that's.
But he was a part of unraveling the mystery.
Correct.
So it made sense for him to be a Ghostbuster.
The nature of his character from the moment you meet him is kind of insertion, right?
Yeah. Whereas Lucky is just kind of a snobby townie
Yeah, I mean, and she liked him, but she liked the other people she was hanging out with. I don't know. It was a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
Could have been lost on the editing room floor too,
Yeah.
for time, right?
Again, I don't think that the character, like that placeholder of the character, I don't think that was bad. I just think the way that they used her,
and I love that
bad.
she was like the sheriff's daughter. Like that's a fun bit, like that you could have really doubled down on some conflict there and like some cool like
right
plot crossings here.
Well, and there should have been more. There should have been more
right.
of that.
And you know, it works that they get their gear taken from them, and so that's a obstacle they have to overcome. But I think you could have done more with that.
Right. It to me, it seemed like when it was revealed that her dad was the sheriff, it seemed like they wanted that to be a bigger moment than it was. Like, oh, your dad's the sheriff?
Like, what if they would have had an interaction with the sheriff before that was very negative?
Right. Exactly.
And so you have this very positive character and this very negative character, and then you realize that.
Or maybe the sheriff is responsible for allowing the Shandor mine to like stay open instead of being torn down or investigated or something, right? Like he could have played more into that plot to make that reveal better.
Yeah.
And anyway, speaking of the Shandor mine, if that's what it was called, right? The Shandor mine.
Yeah, I saw it back in November, so I do not remember.
I think it's very weird that people like don't remember the Ghostbusters, that it's like not really a huge thing. I mean, like essentially they prove that the afterlife exists, right? Like that's like one of the biggest questions in all of human existence.
Where we're going to segue into Spider-Man No Way Home. Because you see, it's a shared universe, and Doctor Strange, spoilers, he cast a forget spell on most of the world to make them forget the Ghostbusters.
Right.
Yeah, because you can't have Paul Rudd's a great line. Like it was like New York in the 80s was like The Walking Dead. That's a great line. That's a great line of dialogue. The problem is that if that's true, that changes the dynamics of the world and where the world goes to.
Right.
Right?
It makes sense that the kids don't know much about it and don't care a lot about it, because that's kids, right? And it was 30 years ago. But like I said, the afterlife exists. Ghosts exist. The science the Spengler invented essentially to find out all this, that's in the world. There should be like multiple ghost busting corporations, unless all the ghosts are gone. But then that's another part of the world,
right? And they said like, and then I think there's a line in the movie where it's like, well, and then it all just went quiet or something like that. So, but then you could have had something where they're watching some videos on YouTube about it from the 80s, and then you could have some people debunking it on those videos within the movie to like, that never happened, it was just mass hallucination, or like, oh, it's just a trick, or some special effects, or you know, to make us believe that the world no longer believes in ghosts.
Right.
Because if the Ghostbusters really happened in this, if the original Ghostbusters happened in this world of the new Ghostbusters, then again, like you said, there would be ghosts, there would be ghost busting corporations,
mass hysteria, dogs and cats living together.
Exactly. And there's not that in this movie. So it's like, oh yeah, it was a thing that happened, and then the world just kind of meh. Which, to be honest, that's a very world thing to do.
People have very short cultural memories.
What?
So anyway, yeah, I don't know. That's probably all I have to say about Ghostbusters.
Yeah, overall,
I'm looking forward.
Really enjoyed it.
If they have more, I'm looking forward to see it. I do want to see the Lady Ghostbusters now, just to see how it stacks up, what went wrong. I like all of those actresses, so I'm sure it's funny.
I mean,
it's got to be funny.
I don't hate any of the Ghostbusters movies or shows. I will rank them real quick. Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Lady Ghostbusters.
Sorry, what was your number 4?
The new one.
Was your number 3?
Ghostbusters 2.
Was your number 2?
The real Ghostbusters.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I must have had a minor stroke or something. I spaced the entire list out. Yeah. And I, I'd look forward to more. I think, bring me more Ghostbusters, man.
Yeah, man.
So
go ahead.
Spider-Man No Way Home.
Well, we can keep talking about it.
You want to talk about that? Give it a quick once over. Sure. I'm pretty sure all those bad guys died, and there's no trying to cure them was a waste of time, because when they got zapped into the MCU universe, they all did it at their point of death in their previous universes, and they even say it in the movie. And so I'm pretty sure curing them was a waste of time, because they got potentially zapped back to their point of death and just died anyway. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Curing him was not a waste of time, because it allowed the previous Spider-Mans to grow spiritually, to let to become better people, and helping a person to not be evil before they die. It embiggens us all.
It helped. Now they can go to heaven, to Marvel heaven, with Stan Lee and the Watchers.
I thoroughly enjoyed Spider-Man.
Yeah, I did too, and I keep thinking about how maybe somewhere in the past this has happened before, but I can't think of a single instance where you have 3 different properties brought together in such a way that I've just never seen that in the history of cinema. Probably exists out there with like the Universal monsters.
We had Freddy versus Jason, and then in the comics we had like Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, but that never materialized into movies.
Right, and that's so Freddy versus Jason. So it was like what, 1994, 1995 when Jason Goes to Hell came out, and then at the end Freddy's hand comes up and grabs the mask and pulls it underground. Yep. That's when they're talking, okay, Freddy versus Jason. It wasn't until like 2003 that they were able to actually get that put out, because there's just like so much red tape to make that happen.
You had, and like around that same time you had AVP, right?
Mm-hmm. But those are both Fox properties, aren't they?
I think so.
Or weren't they?
Well, and then you hear all like the horror stories of why there's never been a sequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, just because of the red tape.
Yeah, which is a brilliant movie. We gotta talk about that sometime.
I love that movie. Yeah,
but I mean, there's definitely been crossovers, and even before the new Godzilla versus Kong. I mean, they did that prior. They've done like all like the Mummy versus the Wolfman type stuff.
Yeah, but nothing's been like this. This broke new ground in such a meta fun way of like bringing 3 totally different properties together and and tying them up in such a cool way.
Yeah, like
for all the minor faults in this movie, it did so many things right that I love it. What I would like from you before we end this thing, since I just ranked the Ghostbuster movies, I'd like you to rank your Spider-Man movies.
Okay. Well, I think you know it, because
I think we have the same number one.
Number 1 is Spider-Man 2.
Hands down. like
I think that's like the standard of comic book movies, because when it came out,
that and Dark Knight are like two sides of the same coin of like, here's how you do the perfect fun comic book movie. Here's how you do the perfect kind of more serious dark comic book movie.
And it's maybe easy to overlook now because we've had so many since then, and we've gone into Marvel Cinematic Universe and all of that, and it's such a standard now. But when that movie came out, well, when the first Spider-Man movie came out, that was groundbreaking for comic book movies, because we hadn't really seen a comic book character portrayed in such a, and comic book nerds will like tear me apart for this, but such a comic accurate light on screen before. Maybe Blade or something like that, but this was fun and for the masses. And then in Spider-Man 2, it's like they perfected that, right? It wasn't an origin story. They did that all during the opening credits, and they were able to get into like the meat of the Spider-Man character with a great villain, with a great arc. I mean, man, it's such a good
great
movie.
Action scenes. It's a perfect comic book movie.
Yeah. After that, what would I put in between that? Like, I don't know. I really enjoy all the Spider-Man movies. I know a lot of people didn't like the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I don't know. I enjoyed it just fine, but I know that it got a lot of crap.
It would be toward the end of my list, along with Spider-Man 3. But there's tons I loved about both of those movies.
Yeah, I think, so number one is Spider-Man 2, and I think you could probably place them in any order after that. Probably Spider-Man No Way Home, just because of how groundbreaking it is. But then my bottom one would probably be Spider-Man 3, but not because I like hated it. It's just because it had a lot of story problems. They did too much with it, too much with too little time. And it wound up not doing it justice.
Yeah, and it also felt like it got extreme hate for one scene.
Right.
Yeah, it was very much like Tom Cruise.
A scene that was supposed to be funny, right? Like when he's being douchey Spider-Man, like that's not played serious. It's totally played for laughs. It's supposed to be goofy.
Right. Yeah, it very felt much like when Tom Cruise jumped on Oprah's couch, right? Like it was just this. So what? So someone was happy.
He's excited.
He was excited and was a little silly, and you can be like, ew, fine, be ew. But like, don't blow up and like just have this like mass hatred. Like, so he was dancing through the streets to Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. Yeah. Which if you remember was also played brilliantly in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's a great song.
It works.
There should be a fun either dancing or bicycle moment in every movie.
Yeah.
Every movie.
It's a rule. You've heard it here first. So yeah, that's how I would rank the movies.
Where do you throw in Into the Spider-Verse?
Same place. Probably again not as high as No Way Home. I know a lot of people really loved it, and I think that it was a smart idea, because it is creating that multiverse and that Spider-Verse, and it's like Sony setting itself up to be able to play in its own world and play in the MCU world. Like I think really smart business decisions. I enjoyed it, but I do know that it is easier for cartoons to do stuff like that than movies. I didn't think it was like as brilliant as people say it is, but I enjoyed it. Like, I liked it. I like me a good old Spider-Man cartoon.
No, I'm with you. I like them all.
So I enjoyed the cartoon when I was a kid also. And you know what? If they were on Tubi, I would watch the old Spider-Man's.
They were on the 60s, they were or something? On some streaming channel like last year or something that I watched a couple on. I can't remember what it was on. But
like the live action one, not the cartoon. I'd watch that.
Wow.
Yeah, remember that? Where he like shoots his web and it's like clearly like a white rope that he like grabs onto.
Is it strange
Yeah,
to you that
watching
Spider-Man is one of like the biggest superheroes in the world?
No, just because he's a teenager, and it's like, I think that this is interesting, right? Where so we've had 3 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. We only had 2 Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, but now we're at 3 standalone. What am I forgetting? Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. The interesting thing about it is that Spider-Man is kind of it's necessarily a coming of age story because actors get old, right? And you can't. It's about a teenager sort of navigating the world with superpowers. But if you're doing it live action and you have like a real human, they can't be a teenager forever like they can in a cartoon or a comic book. So it has to be a coming of age story. And so there's kind of a time stamp on it. You know, there's only a certain amount of time it can go before he turns into old Spider-Man. But that being said, no, it's not a surprise to me that he's one of the biggest heroes in the world, because I think that that's like a pretty relatable story, at least like in Western culture, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because, like, you know, even from like the 60s, like he's always been like named superheroes. Like you just talk to an everyman on the street, right? You got Superman, you got Batman, you got Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And then, you know, through the 80s and 90s, Wolverine started climbing up there.
Yeah. Well, I remember watching a thing with Stan Lee and explaining why people like Spider-Man, and I'm basically just parroting what he said, but he's obviously thought about it a lot more and can say a lot more on it. But there's just a lot of really relatable things in Spider-Man that I think people latch on to.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So,
yeah. All right. Well, this was a fun
all right,
test.
Man. Yeah, we're going to have to go back and watch it.
This is some behind the scenes stuff right here. It's your Easter egg.
Like, comment, and subscribe. And watch us every Monday or up
where
on
we
Tuesday
watch movies that you haven't seen or heard of.
Yeah.
But you should have.
And you can watch them on Tubi, on the Tubi app, for free, with commercials that come in very awkward spots.
Why don't you just get a face tattoo at Tubi, bro? You like it so much.
Tubi, are you out there?
You should. You should get a face tat of Tubi, and I should get a face tat of not Tubi.
Dude.
I think to be,
man, that's
Tubi
great.
Or not Tubi. Where do you stream?
And we'll just
that's like advertising gold. Like they should like show like while all the other streaming platforms are like lesser than them for some reason, like with the strange selection they have, or the fact that it's free, or like you're like Tubi or not Tubi.
Man,
and then you have the commercial of like why you should watch Tubi and the bad things about other streaming places.
I think you just wrote their ad campaign. We need to take this offline right now, because that's like $1 million idea. Well, all right.
So, copyright.
So, all right, everybody that tuned in, or everybody that's tuning in the future, thank you for watching and indulging us and checking this out. We're going to keep bringing you schlocky content, keep talking about movies and pontificating about what makes movies good and what makes movies bad.
And what makes movies schlocky.
All right.